everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm so excited that you're joining us today. We are going to have a fascinating conversation as usual as we learn from people all around the world at all ages and stages of life. Stay tuned as we shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort.
Here we go. What you think about, you will bring about dementia change.
Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to Alzheimer Speaks. I'm thrilled you can join us today. We are going to have a fantastic conversation as usual, and we're going to be talking about navigating dementia with storytelling and community support. And how does that work and what does that look like? And Karen Murdock, who is the founding partner of Treasured Photo Collections and the creator of Voice Memories, is going to be with us today. But before I introduce you to her, I always like to give a couple of shout outs. So one, I just want to say how thankful I am to be partnering with Twiddle. Twiddle has these fabulous sensory stimulation aids, and they really help calm people down and bring peace, and they can be used by all ages. A soft, comfortable fidget toy that you can wash, which is really neat. And then they also have Adapt-A-Wrap, which is a wonderful garment that just makes it really easy to get on somebody, maybe when their mobility becomes more limited, and it's very, very comfortable. And also I love my partnership with Senni. Senni has this wonderful mindset. They don't even like to use the word incontinence. They have a continence program. They are all about building individuals up to live their best possible life. And they do that by improving their continence care. Check both of them out. We'll have information on the show notes. And we also encourage you to visit Alzheimer Speaks. Check out our free educational resources. We have a ton of them there, as well as Dementia Map. Both of those are .coms, where you can find just a wealth of information. So with no further ado, let's go ahead and meet our guest. Well, Karen, I am so excited to have you join us today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I'm going to have you introduce yourself, if you don't mind.
Oh, I'm happy to introduce myself. Just a little bit of my backstory. I worked most of my life in the funeral and cemetery industry, and I ended up in Alberta, 2 provinces away from my home base, about 10 years ago, because my husband took a position here in the Edmonton area. And suddenly I found I had to create a job for myself. And that's when I became a organizer of photos, and the business has grown from there to where we're helping people now with multi-generational collections, working with those who have the old photo albums and they want to preserve their photos and their stories. I'm also a mother of 5, and I think at last count we were up to 8 grandchildren.
Oh, wow. Wow. Yeah, when you mentioned the old photos, I remember when my parents passed away, and I had these boxes full. I had some that were in, books and stuff, but many were not. And many, none of us knew who they were. And I would go through and I divide them up, and I couldn't, I kept thinking, I can't throw them out. They meant something, but I don't know who. And then finally, after going back to my brothers like 3 times, it's like, okay, I'm not storing these. They don't mean anything to me. I don't know, I don't know what they are. But then in my own basement, I have the old photo things, that you kind of quilted the covers, when you made all of those. We got the ones with the plastic wrap, and you peel them off, and some of them, they're so old, they kind of wreck the pictures, and then the black little tags. And it's interesting how we have stored photos over the years. And and now so many people put them on their phone, but again, that's different than really curating them. And you hear so many people like screaming when their phone goes haywire and they lose them all, and they don't have a backup with that. So um, now, before we get started, kind of with the line of questions, I always ask everybody if they have been personally touched by dementia in their own family or circle of friends.
I definitely have. And my journey with dementia, I'm going to say, started about, 2018. I noticed something was happening with my girlfriend. Things weren't quite right. But it actually took us to 2019 before we got a diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
So that was quite a journey, because you don't even know what to ask because you don't know what you don't know, right? So my friend Janice, who I am the caregiver for, she ended up moving into a locked memory unit, and she's now living in long-term care. Yeah. So definitely been a journey, and she's been one of my inspirations for finding ways to connect with those who do have memory loss.
Yeah, and that comment of you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know where to go. You don't. I mean, there's no real ready reserve, and even the doctors don't know, which we automatically think there are connectors and there are care planners, but so many people are, I hear are lost. Now, there's a few doctors out there that have figured this out, but it's very few in the numbers, from what I hear from people all around the world with that.
Yeah. I would say the biggest resource for me when I was starting out on the journey was a friend who was a couple of years ahead of me on the journey. Her mom had dementia. So she became one of my go-tos to ask questions, to find out what was going on, and even just to enjoy a glass of wine with some nights because I was just like, I don't get it. What's happening here? What do I do now?
Well, it's so easy to be in denial, and they can be in denial. And I mean, that's the easiest thing to do. And then typically you hit a crisis point and go, okay, can't really pretend nothing's going on here. This has to be addressed. And sometimes people end up in the emergency room. I mean, it can be hit all different types of ways. But I know with our family, I always like looked at my folks as being young, and they were 10 years younger than old. Whatever I envisioned old to be, they were always 10 years younger because that was safe for me. That was
Mhm.
easy for me. And then one day, that just, got blown out the window with my mom and her dementia diagnosis, and my dad with brain cancer. And it's like, okay, we can't, we're not in the free zone, the free fun zone anymore. This.
And that's so poignant. My girlfriend, I think one of the tipping points for us was she called me up to come to her home. She lived alone. She'd never been married, had no children. Um, and I went to her home and she was in tears. So she'd gotten a letter sent to her from the police department. Somebody had reported erratic driving under her license plate number. And she was simply trying to get home from an event she'd been out to.
Yeah.
And she was so concerned that anybody would even think she'd been drinking excessively. And that was really the tipping point. You are no longer safe behind the wheel.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember my brother and his wife, actually they held it against my mom for years, but she was supposed to babysit, and she went to drive to their house and she never showed up. And she never showed up because she got lost. And
Mm.
she, it was kind of before the cell phone era. And, by the time she made her way home, she was just a wet noodle. But I think they really thought that she did it purposely. And it was like, we've been telling you something's going on, but it was that whole denial piece, with that. And it was by far not intentional and stuff. So yeah, it is interesting how it works. Now, you have been involved with a study in the blue zone. So I want to hear all about that. Dan actually is from Minnesota here. who started a lot of the studies in the blue zones and stuff. So tell us more about that.
I was fascinated by the blue zone. So as soon as somebody told me about it, I started doing research on it to find out more because, we all want to live healthy lives, long lives. But how does that relate to those with cognitive disorders, right? And I found one of the first things I noticed that I thought was fascinating how is if you have a world map out and you look at where the first five zones are, and like honestly, it's like, wow, they're right across almost in a straight line. I found that really interesting. So that made me think about, oh, I wonder if there's more to just the four pillars that we hear about, and we always hear about, that eating well portion of a lifestyle choice. We hear about exercise, how important movement is. But, we don't really hear enough about the well-being, the general well-being. And I thought of my mother as I was starting to learn about it. My mom and dad came to live with me when they were in their late 70s for physical reasons. And my mom insisted that she had to make her way in the world. Mm-hmm. And I look at that now when I was learning about the blue zone going, oh my gosh, that was her purpose. She had to have a purpose to get up in the morning. And for her, it was making our supper every night. So we adapted the house, the kitchen in particular, to allow her to do that. We got her a bar height stool so she could sit in the kitchen, and it would take her all day. But boy, it gave her purpose, reason to get up out of bed every day. So I thought that was really an interesting connection. And the other thing that really got me was about social interaction. Mm-hmm. We hear so much about seniors that are isolated, but I don't think it's just seniors anymore, to be honest, because often I have women in my world that are in their 40s and 50s, and they're talking about the isolation that they're experiencing. So I found that really interesting, and I kept thinking, going back and looking at, well, the well-being, the purpose, the stress reduction, the social interactions, that's where I can maybe be of the most benefit in creating a support tool in that area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. When you talk about the isolation, I think it's all ages. I think our kids are isolated because they're just thumbing it, doing the text. They're not talking to people. They don't know how to talk. They don't even use a lot of times, like with younger people, you can't leave them a voicemail. Well, you can, but usually their voice message is full and they won't read it. It's just text me. They have different ways of communicating, but I think they don't know what they're missing. They're busy at that level, but busy is not even though it appears interactive, it's missing that emotional connection, which I think is so vitally important.
It is. And I remember one of the things Janice said to me, she had been invited to a cousin's Christmas party, and that was in the early stages of her dementia. And she said to me the day after, she was never going again. And I said, why? I thought it would be beneficial for her because her cousins and her cousins' children would all be there. And she said they just ignored me. I just sat there and felt so lonely. And I thought, you know what? That's because they don't know how to engage with you.
Yep.
Right? So you can even be in a room full of people and still be lonely.
Yeah. Oh, I know our family engagements have changed with the kids. It's like, put your phones down. But I look around and I'm guilty of it sometimes too. Like if people aren't engaging with me, it's like, okay, I fall back on that instead of kind of bumping up and starting a conversation or whatever. It just feels like people are on different wavelengths.
Yes.
And before we didn't have that option. I mean, I was talking with someone the other day and they were talking about raising their kids, and she said, my mom and dad, I mean, we didn't have TV time. We talked, we went outside and played. I mean, kids don't play outside. We were out all day long. We came home for supper and we would use the neighbor's bathroom if we needed to. We didn't even go home to do that, but it was it appeared to be a safer world where people were more comfortable inviting people into their homes and caring for one another without being accused of something, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's been a huge change in society since when I was growing up, and I did exactly what you said. I would knock on the door, the neighbors use their bathroom, and if they weren't home, I'd still go in and use the bathroom.
Yeah, because the doors weren't locked back then. Yeah. And you knew it was okay. You could go to the bathroom, you could get a Band-Aid, or you could get lunch even, I mean, it was just a very, very different world. And I think that sense of community is so important. And I noticed the same thing, like with my mom. People just kind of pulled back, both family and friends. They just didn't know how to interact. So it was almost like how some people deal with death or divorce. I'd rather not be around it because it bothers me, because I don't know what to say. And so I just won't show up.
You're absolutely right. That's exactly what happens. There seems to be a stigma about memory loss, and people are often hiding it. And I look at it and I would say I am experiencing normal aging. Memory loss, right? I always laugh and say, just sometimes it takes the Rolodex a little longer to get there, but it gets there, right? So, but even that, when I'm in a situation, I may be looking to try to get that information up to the forefront as quickly as possible, right? So it causes issues the second you start experiencing any memory loss, never mind dementia.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Yeah, and there's, like you said, there's that stigma too of you're not able, you're not capable to engage anymore, which is such a lie. And we have to break through that stigma. And the only way we do that is, in my opinion, is by having conversations like this.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about voiced memories. That's something that you created. What is that all about?
So, voiced memories is about a way to give purpose to both the caregiver and the person with dementia or MCI. And it's a way to hopefully get them more connected to each other. So, I was thinking about, purpose. Like, so often we think somebody doesn't have a purpose once that memory loss starts to kick in. But actually they do. And that purpose can be to retrieve that information and save the family legacy, the family stories. And an interesting thing is that with my girlfriend Janice, the first time I tried it, we didn't have much success. She was quite advanced already with her dementia. So I went back and I did more research and discovered that the prime time to have her looking at photos were those photos that were taken between about the age of 12 and 30, because we have so many life events, right, that happened during that time frame. So we digitized those photos, uploaded them. I recorded some stories to go with it. I played, the day I went to see her the first time, I played some music in the background from that era just to engage her senses, right? And it really worked. I was blown away because she was listening to my voice, she was seeing the photos, and she was hearing the story behind those photos. And even though she had not connected with me in about a year that I knew she was actually engaging with me, she reached her arm across her body, took mine and held it close to her heart. And of course, I was just, oh my gosh, we've connected, even if it's just for a moment. So that gave me purpose, right? And she gained purpose knowing that her stories were valuable. Her life was valuable. So that was part of what I was hoping to achieve. And I can see it growing more and more, in that we can start using it for helping to age in place, all the way up to somebody with severe dementia. But the other thing was, I kept thinking about Janice's story about how nobody was speaking to her. And I think it's honestly because people don't know how to engage. They don't know how to engage with somebody when they know that there's a memory loss issue. But if you have a family member or a friend that can upload this digital photo, if you can't do it yourself, and the two of you can sit there and record the story, then you're creating more engagement, improved engagement. And then you can, when that person is no longer there, if the person who has dementia is getting agitated or you just can't give them attention at that moment, you can open up a gallery and play it back to them, and that will engage them because they'll hear the voice of someone that they love and care about. And they can also see the photo. So that will help them to become more relaxed and reduce their stress, which is another part of the well-being of an individual.
Yeah, that is so important. With my mom, my mom lived with dementia 30 years. She's been gone for 10 now. So
Wow.
back in the day, I mean, I wasn't connected to anybody or anything. They're just, I didn't even know people like you and so many others exist out there. And so I had created just a tool that people can download. And it's just called Your Memory Journal. But it was to get people, just like you're saying, to engage. And I would ask them, if you come, bring a photo. And if you know the people, write their names down, because they might remember, or we can use those as prompts, if they want to tell us a little bit about the story. But, those things can be played over and over and over again. And to give a person that sense of peace, like you were talking about, in pride, that my life mattered. Somebody put this together. I remember going to the nursing home one time to see my mom, and I would take pictures of my mom, and then I started taking pictures of others. And what I realized was it didn't make any difference if there was even any film in the camera. Somebody who was at, late stages, kind of falling asleep in their wheelchair, not paying attention, they would hear, "Can I take your picture?" and say cheese. And they would just sit up and they would get a smile on their face. And I was shocked because watching them all this time bent over and asleep, I assumed early on in my journey that they didn't communicate, that they couldn't communicate. And it was like, wow, we don't ask. We don't pull them in. This is our own stupid fault, with all of this
Exactly.
stuff.
We're not pulling them in.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, for what you're doing, I mean, that is just so incredibly powerful. And I don't think, and I'm hoping some people will understand through our talk, but some people really need to see a visual representation of it to really understand the impact. Like Alive Inside, when they did the film, and even just clips on YouTube where someone who seemed totally out of it came alive with music. And that was just one of the pieces that you said you used. You use music from their era, which is really important to do. All of that stuff is so ingrained in us.
It really is. And that's one of the things during all my studying and learning is about, engaging as many senses as possible, right? So having the visual of the photo, and we know in not that much into the future, all the photos are going to be there digitally. So it's kind of helping along that way, saving those photos from damage as well, right? And so you've got the photo, you're telling the audio story. So you've got that. So it's like, so maybe you have a picture of them with their grandmother when they were 15. If you can replicate grandma's perfume. If grandma had a fur coat, have something that they can then feel the touch of, right? So that you're engaging as many of their senses as possible. I think that's really a piece that's been missing as well, is that we sometimes focus on just one sense rather than multiple senses. And it just makes it more enriched. And I think we reach them a little bit more the more we engage different parts of their body.
Yeah. And that works for all of us. I mean, I remember,
Mhm.
I sold real estate for 25 years. And one of our tricks was, baking cookies or brownies in the oven, or, we had bread makers and stuff. Or if we were kicking somebody out for an open house, we'd say, hey, if you want to throw a roast in the oven, or the crock pot, just because it felt like home. It smelt like home now. And so those things are used a lot. I mean, you go to the casinos and they're pumping stuff into the air that is just very subtle, that we don't know is there, extra oxygen and things like that. Colors and photos and sounds and tastes and touch, all of that stuff matters. I call that sensory, multisensory engagement. And in fact, I have a whole program on trying to teach people how do you develop a sensory care plan, because people with dementia, especially like on my dementia chats, they talk about how dementia affects them, and everyone is affected differently. No one's the same. But they describe, I love this description, they describe their brain like Swiss cheese. And they say, we never know where the holes are going to be. So we don't know what's going to connect and what's not from day to minute, because our holes rotate. But they say the more senses that we use, the easier it's for them to grab a hold. So, one of the things that drives them crazy is when we talk and we're not looking at them and we're going, hey, come on, let's get going, grab your coat. And they need to read our lips and see our facial expressions, and they're missing all of those types of things. So, you're working really well at trying to pull that together. And then I think what I love even more so in some ways is that it's reusable. It's just, it doesn't ever get old, and anybody can reuse this to engage and to have a conversation, or just sit quietly and be able to sense someone's emotion. They might cry because they're touched so much by a story, even if they can't tell us. We communicate on so many levels, and yet I still see people thinking, only words matter. And I'm like, that's so backwards. Why would you be so rigid when really the goal from everyone's heart is to connect? But it's, I don't know. Do you see that out there where people just feel like it's words only?
I do see a lot of that. And what I've discovered is with somebody with dementia, especially when it's advanced, is that they do communicate through different things. And you may not even realize that they're talking. Mm-hmm. So I have a recreational therapist that goes once a week to work with my friend Janice in the nursing home. And we've discovered that when she's making these noises, sometimes it's her version of singing, mm-hmm. right? And we've noticed when we're taking her for something that she loves, because she's basically nonverbal now, her face radiates. We can see it. When I did one session with her, and the first one, and I started to get teary. I could see her face. She was like, "Oh my gosh, Karen, I didn't mean to upset you." You could see it in her face and that was her communicating. So I think we have to be looking at the whole person. I think everything has to be thought of as holistically right now. Whether it's managing their care, mm-hmm. or looking for new solutions, and looking after our care, right? Because we often hear about how hard it is on caregivers, so we got to make sure we're fueling our body well, that we're looking after our well-being, right? And our social interactions besides with other people, maybe, whether it's faith-based, coming up with a new hobby that we can enjoy so that we're spending time looking after ourselves. And for me, I like to add simple movement. If my brain is kind of on overdrive because I've had a crazy busy day, I simply get up and leave my office and I go walk around the building for 10 minutes. And I come back and it seems to help clear my mind.
Yeah, getting out of the environment. Yeah.
Right.
It makes a huge difference. And that body movement they talk about is so important. Even if you just stand up and, dance around like nobody's watching you, and just kind of shake it out.
That's
And
right.
yeah, I loved what you said about, you can tell by her facial expressions. And my audience has probably heard this story before, but I'm going to throw it in again because I just think it's so important. There was a moment in time where we videotaped my mom with a musician. And I was so proud of those clips. I have them on my YouTube channel. I've walked into conferences and my mom's on the screen. Someone will be using it as an example of pure joy, just this kind of awakening. And I was going to share, I made a video, a CD, and I was going to give it to my mom's friend who could never go visit her. It was just, she couldn't emotionally do that. And there's a lot of people out there that can't.
Yeah.
And, I would meet with her every month, and we had done this for years, and I would update her with mom. And I slid this CD over to her. And she's like 76 years old at the time. And she just screams out at me in the middle of a restaurant. She looks horrible. Lori, you've been telling me you're taking such good care of her. I'm just so ashamed of you. I'm disgusted with you. Right. And she's just reaming me out. And I get that like nervous giggle, like, what do I do with this? The whole restaurant's looking at me like, so, and then I got quiet and I kind of centered myself, and she was still ranting at me. And I looked at her square in the eyes and I said, thank you, Kay. Thank you. What are you thanking me for? And she's still so upset with me. And I said, Kay, I'm thanking you because I did not realize you don't see what I see. And she goes, what do you mean? What do you see? I look at her. That doesn't look like her hair's not done. She doesn't have any makeup on. She doesn't have her lipstick, her nails, her eyebrows are bushy. I mean, she just went on and on and on. You can even see a billy goat hair on her chin. Lori, that doesn't look like your mom. I said, Kay, this is what pure joy looks like today. This is not caring for my mother. I said, she's like, what do you see when you look at this picture, Lori? She's like, I don't get it. I said, I see the big, brilliant smile. I see the dimples. I see the glint in the eye, and kind of, we lose our eyes in our family when we smile. I said, when I look at this picture, Kay, I hear my mom giggle. I said, I'm not looking at the broken and chipped teeth that look like a rusted, chainsaw with fried rice hanging on them, because she was scared of a toothbrush. She was scared of a swab. She couldn't rinse her mouth out anymore, but we chose quality of life over staging her to make someone else comfortable. And, we need to talk about those things because it does look different, but joy is all around us. And I really kind of think, and I could be wrong, but I really think that mom experienced joy on a whole different, deeper level. And I know I did with her, because it was just a tiny moment in time. And even as they were recording her, she'd fall asleep and then she'd kind of wake back up again. And, they were going to stay an hour. They only stayed for a half an hour, but I've got probably, several different clips of her, but they're powerful. And when people visually see that change, they get it. But to describe it or just look at a picture alone doesn't always do it.
And you hit the nail on the head with it's about giving the quality of life that you best can, right? And that's one of the things. So what can you do to make it better for her, but also understanding that her place of joy is different now, right? And that's a big adjustment. It took me a long time to meet her where she is. I wanted to go back to the girl that I knew, right?
Yeah.
And it took everybody a long time to get me to accept that wasn't going to happen, right? But then I could find ways to reconnect with her and make life happen and make it better, right? And I've noticed things since we've got a recreational therapist working with her, since we're doing voiced memories with her, that some habits that she had before are now gone. We had to get shin pads for her because she was constantly scratching her legs. And so my solution originally had been, well, let's put some cream on her legs. But once we got the shin pads put on, we got her engaged in these two other activities. She no longer does it. And if she removes her shin pads, she's not scratching anymore. I think that was a way for her to communicate how bored she was.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
Right?
it was that fidgetiness, that so many people are experiencing. I mean, who knew that fidget toys were going to be a thing, and the kids nowadays are all, wanting them. And again, I think it gets to that core of loneliness and boredom. I want, I
Absolutely.
want something to do, you know.
Right. And I know where my friend Janice is. It's, like they get her up, they look after her basic needs,
Mhm.
right? They get her out of bed, they put her into a broda chair. She is fed. We have somebody who does the feeding for her when I'm not there. And then she is basically sat to look out a window for the rest of the day for how many hours? So boredom, absolutely boredom. And so that makes maybe some of the less, I don't know what the right word would be, but the less engaging activities, right? We don't want them fidgeting. We don't want them, doing certain things. Well, then let's give them something to engage with
Yeah, we
that's
have to replace
positive,
something. Yeah, exactly.
right?
Exactly. Well, I'm
Yeah.
going to take a little break right now. For those of you who are just joining us right now, you might want to rewind and catch our conversation from the beginning. We've been talking with Karen Murdock, founding partner of Treasured Photo Collections and the creator of Voiced Memories, which has just been fascinating. You can go to her website, which is photocollections.ca, or you can go directly to voicememories.ca as well. And Voice Memories is also on Facebook. And they also have a voice memory community circle, which we'll talk a little bit more about here as well. And that is meetings.voicememories.ca. I do want to give a plug in for Qblocks, which is a webmaster who I personally use. They are absolutely incredible. They are easy to deal with. They speak in simple terms, so technology is not over your head. They meet their deadlines. They communicate everything in writing in a private platform where it's not lost. And it's just, for me, it's reduced my stress a lot in terms of all the things that can and will go wrong with a website, from changes you want to make, and have made it very easy for me to kind of self-manage. But they're right there, Johnny on the spot. And when things go wackadoo, they get it straightened out really quick for me. And I know that they're reliable. They just have a wonderful team. So I always like to give them a plug. You can just go to qblocks.com. And if you mention myself, Lori LeBay, or Alzheimer Speaks, they're more than glad to give you 10% off as well. So I just know that that can be frustrating for a lot of people. So I like to give a little plug there. So let's go back and talk with Karen. I want to talk, to you about caring for a loved one with Lewy body dementia, because that could be a little bit different and a little, every dementia is challenging, so don't get me wrong there. But Lewy body can really be challenging with some of the hallucinations and other symptoms that they have. So why don't we talk about that, and how you were affected by that?
That was, I think, one of the hardest parts of the journey was when she was doing the hallucinating and she was accusing me of doing things that I wasn't doing.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the first things was she had been telling everybody in the private memory care unit where she was living that she was moving. And I didn't know, well, where did she get that from? Did she dream it? totally did not understand what that was about. And then it was shortly after that she said, "Oh, how come all my money is gone?" And I went, "Your money isn't all gone. You're sitting financially well. We're okay." So I had to go through that with her. And then, shortly after that, it was, are you, you're stealing from me and all these other things. And she actually had social workers and that contacting me. And I had all the legal papers and responsibilities had been all decided beforehand. So I had the documentation. They thought I needed to go and get another one. I said, "No, I don't think so. Talk to my lawyer. I think I have all that." And I said, "But I'd happily show you the books.
Mm-hmm.
If the money is there." So you have to go through convincing them that everything is okay, if you
Yep.
will. And then you find yourself defending yourself to people about what's going on. So it really is, it's an emotional roller coaster, and that you don't maybe know where do you go to reach out. And then with Janice, it was like all of a sudden her behavior became very erratic. One of the things was that she thought one of the residents where she was living was cold, so she started taking her clothes off to ensure that this woman was safe and was cared for. And when they came to deal with it, when the staff came over, Janice started hitting them and kicking them. And it was just shortly after that then that they found her unresponsive on the floor.
Oh,
Um,
geez.
and then that led us to going to the hospital for the day for all sorts of evaluations. And the interesting thing was at that point, she still had great bladder control. She was still walking. Everything was good. Within 3, 4 weeks, she was no longer able to walk very well. She fell and broke her ribs. She fell and broke her hip. So it was just like it was. And then before long, her ability to communicate verbally started to disappear. So it was really very quick. So it was like, how do you handle this? So that's where I started really doing a lot of research into memory loss and finding out about the different dementias. I was one of those people that thought there was one. You
Yeah.
get dementia, that's it. But when it started affecting her physical abilities, I figured that some point down the road it would. But when it started affecting her physically that way, and the accusations of falsehoods and the hallucinations, that really threw me for a loop. And that's where I really had to reach out and find resources like what you have to help people.
Yeah. It's it's scary when they're, really an altered state of reality with those hallucinations and things. I mean, I've had so many people tell me for couples they can't sleep in the same bed because they are so horrific, and the person with dementia is literally fighting for their lives and sometimes beats up their loved one, and that's not their intent, but they're scared to death, or when they just can't even sleep at all because they're terrified that they're going to have these horrific hallucinations,
Yeah.
and nightmares and stuff. And then you're sleep deprived, and then that causes, I mean, it's just this whole ripple effect with so many things that can happen. Or like a lot of people don't know that the blood pressure can change. So when they stand up, they can fall down quick. Or many times people with Lewy body also have Parkinson's, and they can stiffen up and their legs don't work, like, the mobility. And it's amazing, like you said, how fast it can come on. And every person is different, you
You know,
know.
I think that was one of the things, and one of the things that I found fascinating when we were going through the hallucinations is that she had it in her mind that she was moving.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was taking everything out of all her drawers. She was putting everything, as she would say to me, "I'm preparing to move." Right. So we ended up trying putting locks on some of her cabinets in her that displayed some of her beautiful treasures that she had,
Mhm.
and she literally broke the locks right off. Like that's one of the things that has amazed me, that even though she can no longer walk, for example, she has still got really strong arms.
Mhm.
She can, you know, she could grab things and break things. And that's what we found. So trying to find ways to deal with that. So we started slowly removing things from her environment that we were concerned if she broke those,
Uh-huh.
uh, it could affect her, right? If something was glass or, you know, china, because
Mhm.
she was leaving them alone for the longest time. And then all of a sudden there was this window where she was moving and everything turned upside down.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
Well, when you said, you brought her to the hospital, I thought right away it was going to be a UTI, and
mhm.
that was causing, the issues. And most people don't know that either. I remember the first time my mom had a UTI, I thought they were crazy. It's like it's evident you're over drugging her. Look at her; she can't hold her head up. Her eyes are rolling back in her head. Lori, it's going to be a UTI, and I'm like, that's not a UTI. I've had a bladder infection. It's like I don't have those symptoms. And I had no idea that older adults, and especially people with dementia, have totally different symptoms that just you wouldn't think are at all related to having an infection. But yeah, it's
Yeah,
kind of.
absolutely. And I remember that night coming home, and she was quite afraid to go. It was because she didn't recognize her home.
Mm-hmm.
So there was that fear to get her through the door. And then all of a sudden we were walking and she stopped walking and she looked at me and she said, I know you. I know you really, really well. And then she was gone again.
Wow.
Right. And I talk about that now because that's like one of the moments that I didn't think I would be living for. Right.
Yep.
But it truly is those moments where you get like, oh, somebody will say, oh, Karen's here. And she'll go, oh, my Karen? And it's like, yes, you're Karen, right?
Yep.
So it's amazing how you're finding joy and they're finding joy in the simplest of things, even though, as you say, the hair isn't in that perfect style anymore, and all those other things that we gauge as simple joy, right?
Yeah, well, I think we're so groomed to look right, to
Yeah.
act right, to, all of those things. And, when someone has chronic illness, and their life is going to be cut shorter than you thought, with something like that, none of that stuff matters. If you truly want to stay engaged. Now, if you don't believe it's possible, then you're going to walk away, or you're going to be offensive to them, or you're going to do things that are going to trigger reactions, or what we like to call behaviors. And then you're going to blame them when we're the trigger a lot of times for those things. And so dementia just teaches us so much about living compassionately, living on a deeper level. I think my mom lived 30 years because there was so much to teach me, but I also think she lived that long because she felt engaged.
Yeah.
And
And I think that's really important, Lori, is the feeling engaged, and it's up to us to help them feel engaged and part of the conversation.
mhm. Yeah. I have like a tip sheet with several different things, and they're very basic, but people just they're like, can I get some more of these? And I'm like, yeah. But one of the things on there is duplicate what brings you both joy.
Mhm.
But you can't find joy or recognize joy if you're not going to look for it. If you're going to look for the loss of abilities, if you're going to, wallow in the grief, which is normal to a point. If you're going to plan on how to avoid situations because you're embarrassed, or you actually think you can control the disease, you're going to waste a lot of time in those two frames, and you're not going to focus on the joy. You're not going to see it when it's before you. You're not going to be able to create it, because the only place those two things can be done is in the moment. And we have to be, I think, to really have the deepest of connections, we have to be 100% present in the moment. We have to put the phones down. Because they know if we're not paying attention, they're still able to pick up on, all those nonverbal signs. And I know not everybody listening will remember. I'm trying to think of the name of the show, the Stepford Wives, where everyone, had a smile on their face, no matter if their life was falling apart or not. And I think as caregivers, care partners, we step up with this mask on, like everything is fine, but they can see us fidget. They can hear it in our voice, our mannerisms. They know who we are at our core, and I don't think that ever goes away. And so then we're giving them mixed messages when they can read us truly, and that will frustrate them, just like it frustrates us when we're talking with a friend and they're not being honest, and we know, like, don't tell me you're okay. I know you're not okay. I can see it. I can feel it. Your anxiety is like sitting on the couch right with us. Those things are palatable, and they recognize those things. And to think about somebody who has limited ability to communicate, and how frustrating that is, when we know how frustrating we get, and yet we can verbalize it and we can react in multiple ways. They don't have that ability.
That's really key. So one of the things that I like about voiced memories, and that we were looking at, is that it can be the person that has dementia recording the story, what they remember of it, right? Mm-hmm. And you can try to engage them with different prompts and using different senses. But if they are no longer verbal, then go back a step and get a family member or a friend to do the recording, and give it to the loved one to listen to and look at the photo. That's going to be just as engaging for them, and they're going to know that you actually cared enough to do this.
Yeah.
Right.
And I would imagine maybe you don't engage. Let's say you're a friend and you don't engage with family or no other people. You could take your own stories with that person and create them and allow them to be played over, because it's so heartfelt. It's just on this core soul connection. Like I don't know if you felt this, but I didn't know that there were different levels of unconditional love until the more my mom lost abilities to communicate, the deeper it became. And she actually, for me, Karen, was the safest place in the world for me to go, because I knew I was totally accepted there, and it was peaceful. And even though I never, like, when I got divorced, I never told her I got divorced, because she wouldn't understand that. She would be upset. My whole family loved Tom and blah, 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 blah. And he would still come visit her and things. It just wouldn't make any sense. Even though I couldn't tell her some of those things, just being in her presence calmed me down when I was sad or frustrated, or just like, I don't know what direction I'm supposed to go right now type deal. There was still so much she gave me, even though words weren't spoken.
Right. And I think that's interesting that you're saying about, not having the family or somebody. So one of the things I've been looking at is, how do we incorporate it just into day-to-day life? So, healthy eating is really important. So maybe we know of a favorite meal, right? So take photos, or just, of the food that you find on the internet that replicates it. Take photos while you're preparing the meal with them. Mm-hmm. Enjoy the meal, take photos, record the stories again, And then that can always be played back to them even the next day, right? That, oh, this was a lot of fun, and whether they remember it or not, it doesn't matter. They'll know that they were involved in it, hopefully. So, yeah. I think we need to look for unique and creative ways always to be connecting with people. And I think when we go, we actually have to be sure that we're engaging with them. Sometimes people will say, oh, I'd go visit her, but she doesn't really communicate. Let me know when you're going. And I'll
oh, yeah, that's a real common one.
And I'm like, no, because you're going to end up taking all my time and energy away from her. I want to be engaged with her. I want her to be part of this, part of the conversation. We all have a need. If anything, that's taught me, we all have a need to be social beings, even when we are in advanced stages of dementia.
Yeah, I found with my mom, like my daughter would bring nail polish, and she would, because if she had something physically to do, it was easier. I would always bring, a little lotion, and could massage her hands and her arms and things like that. And my brothers weren't so touchy-feely, but we had like a CD player back in the day where they could push a button, they could handle that, and they would kind of see her come alive with the music. And they still weren't, I think, as comfortable as myself and my daughter, but it eased the process,
it
for
does.
them, with that.
Yeah.
Gosh, there's so many challenges when people feel isolated, and we've kind of talked about the person with dementia. We haven't talked so much about the caregivers, though, because they can really self-isolate and don't even know they're doing it. I mean, I know I did it, and because I was too busy being busy type deal. What do you say to caregivers who, they're feeling like they don't fit in or have time to?
I think that's really important part of it, because there are times where between work and caregiving, there's little energy left, and we're always a little concerned, like nobody even is going to understand what I'm going through. That's why I made the meetings.voicedmemories.ca. It's a virtual world. So there's going to be, like, one room is the theater, where we're playing a video on how do you create your account. We're going to have another room. It's called the resource library, and that's where you're going to be able to download the prompts and everything. But we're going to have just casual rooms. And some of those casual rooms are like the fireside chat, the Zen room, where people can just drop in and have conversations and see other people and know that they understand the journey you're on because they're walking it or they have walked it. So it's a different kind of way to have, I guess, a support group, if you will, just being able to meet with others virtually, because sometimes I know where I'm in Canada, there are times when it's 40 below, I'm not feeling like going outside. But this way you can just kind of go in there and meet with other people. But I think it's important that, that you're practicing the things that we talked about at the very beginning, those blue zones, stress reduction, the movement, continue having as many social interactions you can with your friends in that, and making sure that you're also focusing on your own nutrition and well-being. That's, I think, the biggest thing that I would say for any caregiver is try to find periods of time where you're looking after yourself. And sometimes you just need to sit with somebody and vent.
Yeah. Now, when you talk about virtual, is this, would this be like Zoom meetings that people could drop into, or are these little icons and they're running around in rooms and you're chatting versus talking or seeing a live human being? I mean, there's so many different ways to do these things now.
Yeah. It's really hard to explain it. You really have to just pop into the world for a little bit. We will be having it's going to be open all the time. So even if you want the loved one and some family from different places wanted to pop in, or caregivers, they can pop in. The doors are open unless the door is locked, which will be rare. but what will happen is it looks like you're sitting in somebody's living room and you have little circles and you can see the faces of the people that are in the room
Okay.
so that you can have that conversation with them. If you're struggling with something, you can share about that. We're going to be creating different days for different subject matters, and having hopefully experts come in and do presentations. So it's sort of Zoom based, but it's much cooler.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
a lot more fun. You really have to see it because you can hop from, the Zen room to the theater to the resource center and go all over that virtual world.
Oh, cool. That
Yeah.
sounds really interesting, Karen. Gosh, is there anything that we haven't covered?
I don't think there's much that we haven't covered here today. I think the thing to remember is that, starting with a life review is awesome. And the thing I often say is like there's formal terms for different therapies around reminiscence and everything. And I've never met anybody of any age that didn't like to reminisce.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think engaging in that is really key, whether you're the one reminiscing and they're just listening to you tell the story while you're putting it to the photo,
Mm-hmm.
or whether they can engage themselves. And then you're actually leaving something concrete at the end of the day, because you'll have a photo gallery that tells the stories of somebody's life.
Yep. Well, and reminiscing is good on so many levels because a lot of times what we reminisce are, good times and things. But even if we go into something that wasn't a good time and we reminisce, we know we're on the other side of it.
Yes.
It's in the past. And so that in itself can be a healthy conversation in terms of how somebody process something like that as well. But bringing, it's fun to hear other people's life stories, and it's fun to review our own because sometimes we just forget. I mean, you think of well, probably way more than the millions of stories and situations that each of us has gone through, and everything doesn't bubble to the top, dementia or not. You just that's a lot of storage space there. And so, when somebody brings something like that up, it's just I don't know, I think it allows people to kind of lean back and yet lean in at the same time.
Yeah. I was at a family reunion last year with my brothers and my nephews, and it was really interesting because we were going through and telling the stories, and that my nephew was having a great time listening to it. But it was also interesting that we had different perspectives depending. My oldest brother is 7 years older than me, so his remembrance of something was totally different than mine.
Yep. Well, it's kind of like when a police officer, is trying to get statements. Everybody sees something different. They feel something different because, our experiences have been different. So it makes our perceptions, different from one another. But there's so much to learn, and to be able to go, oh, I didn't see that. I never thought of that before. It just expands who we are in our ability to read the world differently and engage, I think, on a different level. So
Exactly.
thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you.
Again, we've been talking with Karen Murdock, who is the founding partner of Treasured Photo Collection and the creator of Voiced Memories, which is really cool. And I always ask, our listeners to be a giver of hope. Like, click, and share. People need this information. Resources they're hard to find. You don't know what to ask for. I mean, who would know to ask for what Karen's created? I mean, you don't know especially when you're new to a diagnosis, you don't even know the verbiage that people use, let alone the services and products and tools that would be available. And you can go to her websites, photocollections.ca or voicememories.ca. She is on Facebook as Voice Memories. And then check out that Voice Memories community circle. That sounds pretty cool. And that is at meetings.voice let's see, it's voiced with a D, memories.ca. So thank you again, Karen, for your time. Keep up the great work. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Lori. I was very happy to be here today.
Bye, everyone.
Hey everybody, Jared Sebesti here, host of Retire Repurposed. This podcast is dedicated to help people transition into fulfilling and purposeful retirements. Retirement is a big life change. In fact, the two most dangerous years of a person's life are the year they were born and the year they retire. Few people can just flip the switch from working a career 30 or 40 plus years, retiring on Friday, without methodical steps to living what we call a repurposed retirement. To listen now, search Retire Repurposed on your favorite podcast platform, Senior Resource, or Life Audio.